Hello, I'm professional attorney and very much amateur musician Scott Lesowitz, and I was fortunate enough to get in touch with the head songwriter of Physical, and I got to the bottom of whether Miley Cyrus and Dua Lipa received permission to use Physical for their song Prisoner. Now, taking a step back, Rick Beato recently made a video about a non-music channels mashup showing how various recent pop songs sound very, very similar to earlier famous songs. And the most notable to me was the Miley Cyrus Dua Lipa song Prisoner, and how its hook or signature phrase of the chorus sounds just like Physical. And Physical was written by Steve Kipner along with Terry Shattuck. So I first looked at the online record for Prisoner's copyright registration, and indeed Steve Kipner and Terry Shattuck are not given writing credit, and they're not listed anywhere in the registration. And that's even though the registration lists a total of 9 authors. However, the registration does reference 3 transfer agreements, 2 of which are with large publishers. And so, granted, with 9 songwriters, I would assume there would be transfer agreements like this. But it's also possible that one of these publishers was acting on behalf of Steve Kipner and Terry Shattuck. So I figure, you know what? I'll try to get to the bottom of this. Why don't I just try to contact Steve Kipner, the head writer of Prisoner? And believe it or not, I was surprised. I did receive a response from Steve Kipner. So big thank you to Steve Kipner. And this is what Steve Kipner wrote. Hi Scott, FYI, in the case of Doja Cat's song Kiss Me More, I am credited and an arrangement was made. As far as those other songs are concerned, they did not seek approval. One of the interesting things to me is that Doja Cat's song Kiss Me More sounds less like Physical, and yet Doja Cat did seek permission and obtained a license.
Lipstick, lip gloss, hickeys too. We're so young.
So this was Rick Beato's reaction about the lack of credit.
So interpolating something is you basically steal the melody, and as long as you're re-recording it with new lyrics, that it becomes yours. I don't get this yet.
Now, talking as a lawyer, although this, by the way, this video is not legal advice, and I do not warrant the accuracy of this information, but musicians are not free to use someone else's melody, even if they use the fancy word interpolate. The question will be whether or not there is substantial similarity between the 2 works, the 2 songs. And in the case of Prisoner, it's a pretty close call. I think if Steve Kipner or Terry Shattuck had sued for copyright infringement, they would have had a good chance of the judge at least letting the case get to a jury, having a jury decide, but it was not a slam dunk. Okay, so after I shot and edited the video, I opened up my email and I got another email from Steve Kipner. So again, thank you, Steve. That's just awesome of you to pay any attention to me. Who am I? So I had asked Steve basically we're on a first name basis now, basically what was your thought process that they were basically, using the melody from one of your songs? And so Steve wrote back to me that, "Hi again, Scott. I'm sure you're correct, and another time I would have done something about it. I won't now because a few years ago I sold my catalog, so it's not my property any longer, other than the fact I created the songs in the first place. It's nice to know that my bits of my original hits are in the public's consciousness enough to be used again to make hits. Thanks for your interest, Steve." So after finishing recording the video the second time and almost finishing editing it that second time, I watched Phil from Wings of Pegasus's video on this interpolation issue, and I decided to add this little segment here where I provide more clarity about the status of interpolation under copyright law. So as background, there are 2 copyrights in a recorded song. One is the copyright to the song itself, the musical composition, musical work itself. And then the other copyright is to the particular recording of the song. And if you are going to sample someone's song, that would mean that you are using the actual recording of the song in your song. And if you sample, you need to obtain a license from both the owner of the song, the copyright to the song itself, and to the owner of the copyright of the sound recording, and which often is more likely to be the record company. So I'll just refer to it as the record company now. And so let's say you're negotiating and the songwriter, who let's say owns the right to the song itself, is being reasonable, but the record company is being unreasonable. You could decide that instead of sampling, that you will instead record your own version of the song you want to use, and that part you want to use. And then, because you're not using the recording, you would only need to obtain a license to the song, not to the recording. And therefore, you get to just do the one license with the songwriter who, in our scenario, was being reasonable. So interpolation is not generally a way to get around licensing the song. It's a way to get around licensing the particular recording of the song. So with that, let's get back to our regularly scheduled programming in the video I already shot. So I listened to Prisoner and Physical back to back a few times, and I even looked at some sheet music that I found online. Now remember, I'm just an amateur, very much amateur musician, but it appears to me that Prisoner only copies a 6-note sequence from Physical. Both songs frequently sing either Physical or Prisoner 2 times in a row, and they use exactly the same rhythm in that sequence. And since each word has 3 syllables, in each instance where the words are sung twice in a row, there are 6 syllables and 6 total notes. And for the melody, if we ignore what the exact notes are, and instead, if we look at the movement between notes, then 5 of the 6 notes are the same, and the one difference is arguably insignificant. Both songs in the first singing of Physical or Prisoner in that repeated sequence repeat the same note and then drop a whole step. And then when it's done the second time, Prisoner, it's the second set of 3 notes is the exact same as the first 3 notes. Whereas in Physical, it's note, drop a half step, drop another half step. And this is copying the hook of one of the most iconic hooks of a song in popular music and Physical. So that said, it is just a 6-note sequence. That's why I do not think it's a slam dunk case. But the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has stated that a 6-note sequence can be enough to at least allow a jury to decide whether there's substantial similarity. And although in that case, the jury ultimately found that there was no substantial similarity, no infringement. And the Second Circuit, in affirming the famous finding of infringement in the George Harrison My Sweet Lord case, affirmed a finding of infringement focusing on a 5-note sequence that was followed by a 3-note sequence. And the court had found that while the 5-note sequence and the 3-note sequence in isolation would not be enough to be protected in infringement in that case, it did find that when you combined the 2 sequences together in the same sequencing, then it was enough for infringement and did find infringement. And I made a lengthy video previously about the blurred lines case, in which I believe, by the way, it was a very bad finding of infringement, and I discussed that at length in that video. And I think that any individual similarities between blurred lines and Gotta Give It Up are less significant than the similarities between Physical and Prisoner. All right, so with that, thank you for watching, and take care. And by the way, this was kind of interesting because it was a reaction video of a reaction video.